They made her scrub the floors in her wedding dress. They called her a beggar, a gold digger, and a mistake. For 3 years, Genevieve endured the Sterling family's cruelty, hiding her tears behind a smile, waiting for her husband, Preston, to finally stand up for her. He never did. But tonight, at the prestigious Diamond Gala in New York City, everything changes. The moment Beatrice Sterling raises her hand to slap Genevieve in front of the world's elite, she doesn't make contact. Instead, a hand of steel catches her wrist. The doors explode open, and the man everyone fears, the billionaire royal bodyguard, walks in and kneels to the maid. The Sterling dynasty is about to crumble, and you won't believe who Genevieve really is. The sound of fine china shattering against the marble floor echoed through the vast, cold kitchen of the Sterling estate in the Hamptons. "Look at what you've done!" Victoria Sterling screeched, her voice shrill enough to peel the paint off the walls. She pointed a manicured finger, adorned with a 3-carat canary diamond, at the shattered remains of a vintage Hermes dinner plate. "Do you have any idea how much that cost? That plate is worth more than your entire existence, you clumsy, useless girl." Genevieve dropped to her knees, her hands trembling as she began to pick up the sharp shards. "I'm sorry, Victoria. The handle was slippery." "Mother!" "Call me Mother Sterling, or better yet, Mrs. Sterling," the older woman hissed, looming over her. Victoria was a woman who wore her wealth like armor. Today she was encased in a tweed Chanel suit that cost more than most people's cars, her face pulled tight by the best plastic surgeons in Zurich. "My son must have been out of his mind to marry a barista. A nobody. I told Preston you were nothing but a leech." Genevieve flinched as a shard sliced into her thumb, a bead of bright red blood welling up. She didn't cry out. She had learned long ago that tears only fed Victoria's sadism. For 3 years this had been her life. She had met Preston Sterling in a coffee shop in Seattle. He had been charming, different, or so she thought. He played the part of the misunderstood heir to the Sterling shipping empire, a man who wanted love, not status. But the moment the ring was on her finger and she moved into the family estate, the mask fell. Preston was weak, a puppet dancing on his mother's strings, and Genevieve was the audience aimed to be humiliated. "Leave it!" A deep, bored voice came from the doorway. Genevieve looked up. It was Preston. He was leaning against the doorframe, checking his Patek Philippe watch, looking annoyed not at his mother's cruelty, but at the delay. "Preston," Genevieve breathed, standing up, cradling her bleeding hand. "Please, can you help me with the—" "Jen, stop making a scene," Preston sighed, running a hand through his perfectly gelled blonde hair. "Mother is stressed. The gala is tonight. You know how important this merger is. If we don't secure the partnership with the Vane Syndicate, the stock drops. Just clean it up and stay out of the way." "I'm your wife, Preston," she whispered, the hurt piercing deeper than the ceramic shard in her thumb. "I'm supposed to be by your side at the gala." Victoria let out a dry, cruel laugh. "You? At the Metropolitan Museum of Art? Wearing what? That rags-to-wishes dress you bought at a department store?" She stepped closer, invading Genevieve's space. "No, you are coming, Genevieve, but not as a guest. The catering company is short-staffed. You'll be serving." Genevieve froze. "What?" "You heard me," Victoria sneered. "If you want to earn your keep in this house, you'll put on a uniform and hold a tray. Maybe then you'll finally be useful." She looked at Preston, silently begging him to intervene. To say no, that is my wife. Preston looked at his shoes. "It's just for one night, Jen. It would really help Mom out. Besides, Tiffany will be there. It would look awkward if you were standing next to me when I need to. Network with her family. Tiffany St. Clair, the heiress to a real estate empire. The woman Victoria actually wanted Preston to marry. Genevieve felt something inside her chest crack. It wasn't her heart. That had broken long ago. It was the lock on a cage she had kept shut for 3 very long years. "Fine," Genevieve said, her voice dropping an octave, losing its tremor. She looked Preston dead in the eyes. "I will attend the gala, and I will do exactly what is expected of me." Victoria smirked, mistaking the resolve for submission. "Good. Make sure the champagne is chilled, and cover that scratch on your hand. Nobody wants blood in their caviar." As the Sterlings swept out of the kitchen to prepare for their helicopter ride to Manhattan, Genevieve stood alone in the silence. She walked over to the trash, dumped the broken porcelain, and then pulled a small, outdated burner phone from a hidden pocket in her apron. She dialed a number she hadn't called in 1,095 days. It rang once. "Status," a voice answered. It wasn't a question. It was a command. The voice was deep, raspy, and sounded like danger wrapped in velvet. "Silas," Genevieve said, her voice shifting from the meek housewife to something regal, cold and commanding. "Code Black. The experiment is over. I'm at the Sterling estate." There was a pause on the other end, followed by the distinct sound of a gun slide being racked. "I'm 10 minutes out, Your Highness." The preparations for the Sterling Shipping Golden Anniversary Gala were the talk of New York City. The event was being held at the Pierre Hotel's Grand Ballroom. Victoria had changed the venue from the Met at the last minute to accommodate the specific security needs of a mystery guest, though she assumed it was just a high-ranking politician. In the servants' quarters of the hotel, Genevieve stared at the mirror. She was wearing the black skirt and white button-down shirt of the catering staff. Her hair was pulled back into a severe bun. She looked invisible. Just another member of the help. "Hey, new girl," the catering manager barked, shoving a tray of Dom Perignon flutes into her hands. "Room 402 needs a pre-party top-up. Move it." Genevieve took the tray. Room 402 was the presidential suite, the Sterling suite. She took the service elevator up, her heart beating a steady, war drum rhythm. When she entered the suite, the air smelled of expensive hairspray and aged scotch. Preston was standing by the window, adjusting his bow tie. Victoria was sitting on a velvet chaise, barking orders into her phone. And there, sitting on the arm of the sofa, sipping champagne, was Tiffany St. Clair. Tiffany was everything Genevieve wasn't allowed to be, loud, flashy, and draped in diamonds. She wore a red Versace gown that was cut down to her navel. "Oh, look, the maid is here," Tiffany giggled, seeing Genevieve enter. She didn't recognize her. Why would she? To people like Tiffany, the help didn't have faces. "Put it there," Preston said, not even turning around. Genevieve walked forward and placed the tray on the coffee table. As she did, Victoria hung up the phone and looked at her. Her eyes widened, a wicked glint appearing. "Oh, look who it is," Victoria cooned. "Tiffany, darling, you know our little charity case, don't you? This is Genevieve." Tiffany choked on her drink. "Wait, this is the wife? The one you told me about?" She looked Genevieve up and down with grotesque amusement. "Oh, Preston, you are a saint. She really does look like a rescue dog." Preston finally turned around, his face flushing red. "Mum, don't start." "Why not?" Victoria stood up, walking over to Genevieve. She agreed to this. She knows her place. "In fact, Jen, be a dear and wipe Tiffany's shoe. I think a drop of champagne splashed on it." Genevieve stood straight, her spine a rod of iron. "No." The room went silent. The air conditioner hummed loudly. "Excuse me," Victoria hissed. "I said no," Genevieve repeated calmly. I agreed to help with the event. I did not agree to be humiliated for your entertainment. Preston rushed forward, grabbing Genevieve's arm roughly. Don't you dare speak to my mother like that. You are living on our dime, Genevieve. You have nothing. You are nothing without the sterling name. Now apologize. Genevieve looked at his hand on her arm. Let go, Preston. Or what? Tiffany laughed. You'll go back to the coffee shop? Or, Genevieve said, her eyes turning into shards of ice, you will lose the hand. Preston laughed, a nervous, jerky sound. He squeezed tighter. You've gone crazy. Suddenly, Genevieve's phone, the burner, buzzed in her apron pocket. One vibration. He is here. I'm giving you one chance, Preston, Genevieve said softly. To be a man. To choose your wife over this circus. Preston looked at Tiffany, then at his mother, then back at the woman in the waiter's uniform. He sneered. I'm divorcing you, Genevieve. The papers are being drawn up tomorrow. I'm marrying Tiffany. This merger with her family will make us billionaires. You were just a placeholder. He shoved her back. She stumbled but didn't fall. Understood, Genevieve said. She didn't look sad. She looked relieved. Enjoy the gala, Preston. It will be a night to remember. She turned and walked out. Where are you going? Victoria screamed after her. You have tables to serve. I have a different appointment, Genevieve called back without turning around. She walked down the hallway, unbuttoning the cuffs of the cheap catering shirt. She reached the service elevator but didn't press the button for the lobby. She pressed the button for the penthouse, the floor above the Sterlings, the floor that had been bought out entirely by a shell company named Aegis International. The doors opened to the penthouse. Standing there, filling the hallway with sheer physical presence, was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite. He wore a tuxedo that cost more than the Sterling's annual shipping insurance. He had a scar running through his left eyebrow and eyes that had seen wars start and end. Silas Vane, the royal bodyguard, the most dangerous man in Europe. He saw Genevieve in her waiter uniform. His jaw tightened, a muscle feathering in his cheek. Did they touch you? His voice was a low growl. It doesn't matter, Silas, she said, walking past him into the opulent suite where a team of stylists and security personnel waited. Is the dress ready? It is, Your Highness, Silas said, falling into step one pace behind her. And the dossier on the Sterling finances? Release it, Genevieve said, stripping off the waiter's shirt, revealing a diamond-encrusted camisole beneath. Release it all. I want their stock to hit zero by the time dessert is served. The ballroom of the Pierre was a sea of black ties and designer gowns. The creme de la creme of New York society was there. Senators, tech moguls, and old money families clinked glasses of scotch and discussed tax evasion. At the center of it all held court the Sterlings. Victoria was beaming. Preston was holding Tiffany's hand, and Arthur Sterling, the patriarch, was boasting about the upcoming merger. Yes, yes, Arthur boomed. The Sterling-St. Clair merger will revolutionize logistics. We are expecting a significant capital injection from a European investor tonight as well. Where is your wife, Preston? A rival CEO asked, looking around. Preston waved a hand dismissively. Oh, Genevieve couldn't make it. She's under the weather. Fragile constitution, you know. She's serving the crab cakes, Victoria whispered to Tiffany, and they both erupted into giggles. Suddenly, the lights in the ballroom dimmed. The spotlight hit the grand staircase. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice boomed, please welcome the guest of honor, representing the sovereign principality of Valoria, the crown princess. A hush fell over the room. Valoria? The small European nation, known for its banking secrecy and trillion-dollar sovereign wealth fund? No one knew a Valorian royal was in New York. The double doors at the top of the stairs swung open. Silas Vane walked out first. He scanned the room, his presence radiating such intensity that people instinctively took a step back. He stopped at the edge of the landing and nodded. Then she stepped out. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue silk, custom-made by Ely Saab, woven with threads of real platinum. Around her neck sat the heart of Valoria, a sapphire necklace the size of a pigeon's egg, last seen in a museum in Paris. Her hair was no longer in a bun, but cascaded in waves down her back. She looked powerful. She looked terrifying. She looked familiar. Victoria Sterling dropped her champagne glass. It shattered, but no one noticed the sound. "Is that—" Preston squinted, his face draining of all colour. "No, it can't be." Genevieve descended the stairs. She didn't walk, she glided. Every step was a statement. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. She walked straight toward the Sterling table. The silence was deafening. Silas followed her, his hand resting casually near the inside of his jacket. Genevieve stopped 3 feet from Preston. She towered over him in her heels. "Good evening, Preston," she said. Her voice was amplified by the acoustics of the silent room. "I believe you were looking for an investor." "Jen?" Preston whispered, his voice cracking. What is this? Where did you get that dress?" "You stole it!" Victoria shrieked, her brain unable to process the reality. She stepped forward, her face twisted in rage. "You little thief! You stole that necklace! Security! Arrest this woman!" Victoria reached out to grab the necklace, to tear it off Genevieve's neck. Wham! It happened so fast the eye couldn't track it. 1 second Victoria was lunging. The next, she was on her knees, gasping for air. Silas had intercepted her, grabbing her wrist and twisting it behind her back with surgical precision. He forced her down, his polished shoe pinning the hem of her Chanel skirt to the floor. "Do not," Silas growled, his voice echoing through the ballroom. "Touch her Royal Highness." "Highness?" Arthur Sterling stammered, stepping forward, his hands shaking. "What is the meaning of this?" Genevieve looked at her father-in-law. "It means, Arthur, that the nobody your son married is Princess Genevieve of Valoria, sole heir to the Valorian banking dynasty, and the woman who has been secretly funding your failing shipping company for the last 3 years to keep you out of prison." The room gasped, a collective intake of breath from 300 people. "Funding?" Preston choked out. "But we are profitable." "You were bankrupt 3 years ago," Genevieve said coldly. "I paid your debts. I covered your losses. I did it because I loved you. I wanted to see if you loved me, or just the money." She looked at Tiffany, who was backing away, trying to hide behind a waiter. "I got my answer tonight." Genevieve signaled to Silas. He released Victoria, who collapsed onto the floor, sobbing in humiliation. Silas reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek, black tablet. He handed it to Genevieve. "Ladies and gentlemen," Genevieve addressed the crowd, her voice ringing clear. "The Sterling Shipping Company has been engaging in fraud to inflate their stock prices. As the primary creditor, the Royal House of Valoria is hereby calling in all loans." She tapped the screen. Immediately, phones began to buzz all over the room. The bankers and investors in the crowd were checking their notifications. "My God," someone shouted from the back. "Sterling stock just dropped 80%. It's a free fall." "No," Arthur screamed, clutching his chest. "You can't do this." "It's done," Genevieve said. She turned to Preston. "You wanted a divorce, Preston? You have it. But you won't be marrying an heiress. You'll be lucky if you can afford a lawyer." She turned on her heel. "Silas, take me home." "Yes, ma'am," Silas said, shooting one last terrifying glare at Preston before turning to follow his queen. But just as they reached the doors, Preston, fueled by panic and rage, grabbed a steak knife from a nearby table. "You ruined my life!" he screamed, charging at her back. The scream that tore from Preston Sterling's throat was animalistic, a guttural roar born of 3 years of hidden resentment and the sudden, catastrophic collapse of his entire world. The steak knife glinted under the chandeliers of the Pierre's grand ballroom as he lunged across the few feet separating him from Genevieve's unprotected back. Time seemed to warp. Genevieve, sensing the shift in the air, began to turn, her sapphire eyes widening slightly. But she didn't need to move. Silas Vane had been waiting for this for 195 days. He didn't just step in front of her. He materialized. The crowd barely registered movement before the sickening crack echoed through the silent room. Silas's left hand, moving with the speed of a striking cobra, intercepted Preston's wrist mid-air. The momentum of Preston's charge worked against him. Silas didn't just stop the arm. He twisted it counterclockwise with ruthless, calculated force. The knife clattered uselessly to the marble floor. Preston's roar turned into a high-pitched shriek of agony as the radius and ulnar bones in his forearms snapped. Preston hit the floor knees first, cradling his shattered arm, whimpering as the adrenaline faded and the blinding pain set in. He looked up, tears streaming down his face, past the immaculate hem of Silas's trousers to the face of the man who had broken him. Silas stood perfectly still, his chest not even heaving. He looked down at Preston like one might look at a cockroach that had crawled onto a dining table, with nothing but cold, clinical disgust. "That," Silas said, his voice low, but carrying to every corner of the stunned ballroom, "was a mistake, Mr. Sterling. Attacking a head of state carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 25 years in a federal penitentiary, and that is before I file charges for assault on a royal guardsman." Genevieve turned fully now. She looked down at the man she had shared a bed with for 3 years. The man who had watched his mother berate her daily and done nothing. She felt a flicker of something, not pity, but a profound sadness for the time she had wasted. "Preston," she said softly. The microphone on the podium nearby picked up her voice. "Did you really think I would come here unprotected?" Around the room, the spell broke. The doors burst open, and a dozen tactical officers from the NYPD, accompanied by federal agents, swarmed the room. They had been waiting in the wings, briefed by Silas hours ago on the massive financial fraud about to be exposed. "Arthur Sterling, Victoria Sterling," an FBI agent announced, marching toward the head table where Arthur was clutching his chest, and Victoria was trying to crawl under the tablecloth. "You are under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, and international money laundering." The scene was pure chaos. Camera phones were flashing wildly, capturing the fall of an American dynasty in real time. Tiffany St. Clair, realizing her proximity to the radioactive Sterlings was social suicide, tried to slip away toward the exit. "Ms. St. Clair," Genevieve called out. Her voice stopped the heiress in her tracks. Tiffany turned, trembling, her fake tan looking suddenly sallow against her pale skin. I didn't know, Your Highness. I swear. They tricked me too." Genevieve smiled, a faint curve of her lips that didn't reach her eyes. "Nobody tricks you, Tiffany. You go where the money is. I suggest you call your father. The St. Clair real estate holdings are heavily leveraged with sterling bonds. By tomorrow morning, your family will be insolvent too." Tiffany let out a strangled sob and ran out the door, shoving past the entering paramedics who were headed for Preston. The paramedics loaded a sobbing Preston onto a stretcher, cuffing his good hand to the rail. As they wheeled him past Genevieve, he looked at her one last time. His eyes were full of terror, confusion, and a belated, desperate regret. "Jen," he whispered. "Why?" "Because, Preston," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "You had a diamond in your hand, and you treated it like broken glass. Now you have nothing but the cuts." Silas offered Genevieve his arm. "Shall we, Mum? The air in here has become foul." Genevieve placed a hand on his forearm. "Yes, Silas. Take me home." They walked out through the center aisle, a queen and her knight, leaving the wreckage of the Sterling Empire burning behind them. 3 hours later, the adrenaline crashed. Genevieve sat in the back of the armored Maybach limousine as it sped toward a private airfield in New Jersey. The Valorian Royal Jet was waiting, engines already spooled up. She was still wearing the sapphire necklace, its weight heavy on her collarbone. She stared out the rain-streaked window at the blurring lights of the city that had been her prison for 3 years. Her hands, resting in her lap, began to shake. It started as a tremor in her fingers and quickly spread up her arms until her whole body was vibrating with nervous energy. She gasped, trying to pull air into her constricted lungs. A warm, calloused hand gently covered hers, stilling the tremors. "Breathe, Genevieve," Silas said. He wasn't looking at her. His eyes were scanning the perimeter mirrors, ever the bodyguard. But his touch was an anchor in the storm. He was the only person in the world allowed to call her by her first name without the title. Was I too cruel, Silas?" she whispered, her voice rough. Seeing him on the floor, crying, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like ashes. Silas squeezed her hand briefly before pulling away to adjust his earpiece. "Cruelty is inflicting pain without reason, Mom. What you delivered tonight was justice. Long overdue justice. They were parasites. You simply stopped letting them feed." "I waited so long," she confessed, leaning her head back against the leather seat. "Every day for 3 years I woke up hoping Preston would say, 'Enough, Mother.' Hoping he would buy me flowers instead of telling me I spent too much on groceries. Hoping he saw me." She closed her eyes, a single tear escaping. "My father was right. The old king always said that wealth blinds people to character. He made me promise, on his deathbed, that I wouldn't marry a royal sycophant, that I would go into the world anonymously and find someone who loved Genevieve the person, not Genevieve the princess." "A noble experiment," Silas murmured, his voice softening. He had sat by that same deathbed. He had made a promise, too, to protect her with his life while she carried out this insane plan. "It was a failed experiment," she said bitterly. "I found a weak man dominated by a greedy mother, and I let them treat the future Queen of Valoria like a scullery maid because I was too stubborn to admit my father was wrong." "You proved them wrong tonight," Silas said. The car turned onto the tarmac, the whine of jet engines growing louder. "You didn't break, Genevieve. You endured. You gathered intelligence. And when the time was right, you executed a tactical takedown that would make a seasoned general jealous. Your father would have been incredibly proud of the strength you showed tonight." The car stopped by the jet stairs. Silas got out first, scanning the dark airfield before opening her door. "What happens to him now?" she asked, taking his hand to step out into the cold night air. "Preston is currently in surgery to have plates and screws put into his arm," Silas reported factually. "Once he wakes up, he will be formally charged by federal prosecutors. The evidence you compiled, the duplicate books you photographed while cleaning Victoria's office, the recorded conversations of Arthur admitting to bribery, it's ironclad. The Sterlings will die in prison." Genevieve nodded. It was over. The chapter was closed. "Good," she said, walking up the stairs to the jet. Let's go home, Silas. I have a country to run. But as the jet took off, climbing high above the drama of New York, Genevieve didn't feel the relief she expected. She felt an emptiness. She had spent 3 years defined by her struggle against the Sterlings. Who was she now that they were gone? And she couldn't shake the feeling that Silas was holding something back. He had been too tense in the car, his eyes too vigilant even for him. "Silas," she said, turning her seat to face him across the cabin aisle. He was reviewing data on a secure tablet. "Tell me." He didn't look up immediately. "Tell you what, Mom. Don't lie to me. I know that look. It's your threat assessment look. The Sterlings are finished. Preston is handcuffed to a hospital bed. Why are you still wound so tight you could snap steel?" Silas finally looked up. His slate-grey eyes were grim. He tapped the tablet, sliding it across the aisle to her. "Because, Genevieve, the Sterlings were idiots. Greedy, incompetent idiots. There is no way they pulled off an international money-laundering scheme of this magnitude by themselves. They didn't have the brains or the connections." Genevieve looked at the tablet. It showed a complex web of financial transactions, shell companies nesting inside shell companies like Russian dolls. "You think they had a partner?" she asked. "Not a partner, a master," Silas corrected. "The Sterlings were just the washing machine. Someone else owned the dirty laundry. When you bankrupted the Sterlings tonight, you didn't just destroy their family fortune, you vaporized about $400 million belonging to someone else. Someone very dangerous." Genevieve felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cabin altitude. "Who?" Silas pointed to a logo that appeared repeatedly in the deepest layers of the financial web, a stylized V intertwined with a serpent. "The Vane Syndicate," Silas said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "An Eastern European organized crime conglomerate dealing in arms trafficking, human smuggling, and high-stakes financial terrorism. They don't get sued, Genevieve. They don't get arrested. They eliminate problems." Genevieve stared at him. "Vane? Like your name?" Silas looked away, his jaw tightening so hard she thought a tooth might crack. For the first time since she had known him, the invincible bodyguard looked vulnerable, haunted. "I need to tell you the truth about where I came from, Genevieve. Before I was your guard. Because the past I ran away from just caught up to us." The Valorian royal palace sat atop a cliff overlooking the Mediterranean, a fortress of white stone and centuries of history. It was supposed to be the safest place on earth for Genevieve. But 3 days after the gala, the air in the palace was thick with tension. The global media frenzy was unprecedented. The Cinderella princess story had captured the world's imagination. Memes of Victoria Sterling being pinned to the floor by Silas were trending worldwide. Team Genevieve was the #1 hashtag across all platforms, but inside the palace walls there was no celebration. Genevieve sat in her private study, formerly her father's. The desk was covered with intelligence reports. She wasn't wearing ball gowns now. She was in a severe black business suit, her hair pulled back tight. She looked every inch the reigning monarch she was about to become. Silas stood by the window, looking out at the azure sea. He hadn't slept in 72 hours. "My real name is Silas Volk," he said, continuing the conversation they had started on the jet. "My father is Dmitri Volk, the head of the Vane Syndicate." Genevieve didn't interrupt. She just listened, processing the impossible information. "I grew up in that world," Silas continued, his voice monotone, detaching himself from the memories. "I was trained from the age of 5 to handle weapons, to track targets, to understand the logistics of illicit trade. I was supposed to inherit the empire." He turned from the window. When I was 18, my father ordered me to execute a rival's family, including their children. To blood me, he called it. What did you do? Genevieve whispered. I left, Silas said simply. I disappeared. I used the skills they taught me to evade them. I changed my name, joined the French Foreign Legion, then private security contractors. Eventually, your father's head of security recruited me. He needed someone outside the system, someone with a specific skill set. Does my father know? He knew everything. It's why he hired me. He knew that the only person who could protect you from the wolves of the world was someone raised by them. Genevieve stood up and walked over to him. She reached out, hesitating for a moment, before placing a hand on his arm. It was rock hard with tension. You are nothing like them, Silas. You are the most honorable man I know. Silas laughed darkly. Honor is a luxury, Genevieve. Right now, my bloodline is a liability to you. My father knows who I am. He saw the gala footage. He knows his wayward son is the royal bodyguard to the woman who just cost him $400 million. What will he do? As if on cue, the heavy oak door to the study burst open. The captain of the palace guard rushed in, his face pale. Your Highness, forgive the intrusion. We have a situation at the perimeter. Speak, Genevieve commanded. A delivery truck approaching the north gate. Routine scan. It blew up, ma'am. A massive VBIED, vehicle-borne improvised explosive device. The gate is destroyed. We have 4 guards down. Critical condition. Silas was already moving to the weapons cabinet, hidden in the wall paneling. He pulled out a tactical vest and an assault rifle, tossing a smaller handgun to Genevieve. It's starting, Silas said calmly, checking the magazine of the rifle. That bomb wasn't meant to breach the palace. It was a knock on the door, a message. From Dmitri? Genevieve asked, checking the safety on the handgun as Silas had taught her. Yes. He's telling us that nowhere is safe. He's telling me that I can't hide behind palace walls. Silas walked over to her, towering over her. His eyes were fierce, blazing with a protective intensity that took her breath away. Genevieve, you need to go to the bunker beneath the palace, the panic room. It's sealed, independent air supply. You stay there until I come get you. I am not hiding in a hole while my guards are being attacked, she said defiantly. I am the head of this state. I will stand my ground. This isn't a state matter anymore, Silas growled, grabbing her shoulders. This is a blood feud. My father won't stop until he gets his money back, or until we are both dead. He will send mercenaries. He will bribe officials. He will burn this whole country down to get to you. Then we fight back, Genevieve said, meeting his gaze without flinching. She wasn't the scared barista in the Hamptons kitchen anymore. She was a queen whose territory had been invaded. We don't just defend, Silas. We attack. You know their operations better than anyone. You know where their money is, where their vulnerabilities are. Silas stared at her, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. It was a look she had never seen before, the look of the predator he was raised to be, finally unleashed. You want to go to war with the syndicate? He asked. They came to my house, Genevieve said coldly. I think it's time we paid a visit to theirs. She stepped away from him and picked up a secure satellite phone from her desk. Get the jet ready again, she ordered the pilot on the other end. And Silas, tell the armory to load the heavy ordnance. We're going to Eastern Europe. The Gulfstream G650ER sliced through the heavy cloud cover over the Carpathian Mountains, the turbulence shaking the cabin violently. Outside, the world was a void of darkness and snow. Inside, The air was heavy with the scent of gun oil and nervous anticipation. Genevieve sat across from Silas, watching him assemble a Heckler & Koch MP7. He moved with the terrifying grace of a machine, every click and snap of the weapon echoing in the silent cabin. He wasn't wearing his tuxedo anymore. He was dressed in tactical black gear, a ceramic plate carrier strapped over his chest, a knife sheathed at his shoulder. He looked like the god of war. "We land in 20 minutes, Silas said, not looking up from the weapon. "The intel from MI6 confirms it. Dmitri is hosting a summit at Voronezh's castle. He feels safe there. He thinks we are cowering in your panic room in Valoria." "He underestimates us," Genevieve said, adjusting the strap of the Kevlar vest she wore under her thick winter coat. "Just like the Sterlings did." Silas paused. He looked up, his slate-grey eyes locking onto hers. For the first time, the professional mask slipped entirely. "Genevieve, listen to me. Once we breach the perimeter, I cannot guarantee your safety. My father, he is a monster. If it comes down to a choice between capturing him and saving you, I will burn the world down to get you out. Do you understand?" Genevieve reached across the aisle, placing her hand over his. His skin was cold. "I'm not asking you to save me, Silas. I'm asking you to stand with me. We finish this tonight. No more looking over our shoulders." The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Wheels down in 2 minutes. Lights are out. We are coming in hot." The convoy of 3 armored black Range Rovers, acquired by a local contact, snaked up the treacherous mountain road toward the castle. The snow was falling harder now, a white curtain masking their approach. Voronezh's castle was a fortress of jagged stone perched on a cliff edge. It was protected by a private army, high walls, and the fear that the name Volk inspired. "Check your comms," Silas whispered into his headset as they killed the headlights a mile out. "Check," Genevieve replied, her voice steady. She wasn't carrying an assault rifle, but the Glock 19 on her hip felt reassuringly heavy. But her real weapon was in the briefcase, handcuffed to her left wrist. They didn't knock. Silas and a team of 6 elite mercenaries, men loyal only to the Valorian crown, breached the east wall, using silent thermal charges. The explosion was a dull thump, swallowed by the howling wind. They moved like ghosts through the courtyard. Silas took point, dropping 2 perimeter guards with suppressed shots before they could even reach for their radios. Genevieve stayed close to his back, moving exactly as he had taught her during those late-night sessions in the palace gym that she used to pretend were just for fitness. They reached the heavy oak doors of the great hall. Inside, the faint sound of laughter and clinking glasses could be heard. Dmitri was celebrating. Silas looked at Genevieve. He nodded once. He kicked the doors open. The room froze. It was a cavernous hall, lit by roaring fireplaces and iron chandeliers. At a long banquet table sat a dozen men, arms dealers, traffickers, warlords, and at the head of the table sat Dmitri Volk. He was an older, crueler version of Silas, the same sharp jaw, the same cold eyes, but where Silas had discipline, Dmitri had malice etched into every wrinkle. "Silas," Dmitri said, not even rising from his chair. He picked up his glass of vodka. "I was wondering when you would come home, and you brought a guest." A dozen guards raised their weapons, aiming at Silas and Genevieve. Silas's team aimed back. It was a Mexican standoff, tension pulled so tight it vibrated in the air. "Father," Silas said, his voice a low rumble, "tell your men to stand down, or this room becomes a graveyard." Dmitri laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "You always were dramatic. You think you can walk into my house with 6 men and threaten me? I have 50 guards outside." "Your guards outside are sleeping," Silas lied smoothly. and the 4 snipers I have positioned on the ridges have their lasers trained on your skull right now." It was a bluff. There were no snipers. But Dmitri hesitated. He glanced at the window. "Why are you here?" Dmitri sneered. "To beg for your life? To return my money?" Genevieve stepped forward, stepping out from behind Silas's protection. She placed the briefcase on a side table and unlocked the cuffs. "I'm here to make a deal," she said, her voice projecting regally across the hall. Dmitri looked her up and down with amusement. "The barista princess. You have spirit, I'll give you that. But unless that case is full of $400 million in bearer bonds, you have nothing I want." "It's not money," Genevieve said, opening the case. She turned it around. It was a laptop, displaying a complex interface of a global banking server. "It's leverage." "I don't need leverage," Dmitri scoffed. "I own the police in this region." "Do you own the United States Treasury?" Genevieve asked calmly. "Do you own the European Central Bank?" Dmitri's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "When I liquidated the sterling accounts," Genevieve explained, her fingers hovering over the Enter key, "I didn't just take the money. I traced the routing numbers. I found the web, Dmitri. The 42 shell companies you use to wash your money through Singapore, the Cayman Islands, and Zurich." She smiled, a cold, dangerous smile that reminded Silas of the night she destroyed Preston. "Currently, I have a program running that is set to execute a mass flagging protocol. If I press this key, every single cent you have in the international banking system, roughly $2.4 billion, will be instantly frozen for terror financing investigation. Your assets will be seized. Your empire will be bankrupt in 10 seconds. The room went deathly silent. The other warlords at the table looked at Dmitri nervously. They were loyal to his money, not him. If the money vanished, so did they. Dmitri stood up slowly, his face turning a violent shade of red. "You wouldn't dare. If you do that, you die here." "If I die," Genevieve said, "my thumb lifts off this key, and the program executes automatically. It's a dead man's switch." It was the ultimate bluff. The program required a password to execute, not a release. But Dmitri didn't know tech. He knew fear. "What do you want?" Dmitri hissed, a vein throbbing in his temple. "Surrender," Silas said, stepping forward. "You surrender to Interpol. You confess to the bombing of the Valorian Palace. You dismantle the syndicate. And if I refuse? Then you die a pauper," Genevieve said. "And your friends at this table will kill you before I even have to, because you'll be the reason they lost their fortunes too." Dmitri looked around the table. He saw the shifting eyes of his allies. He saw the greed turning to calculation. He was cornered. "Fine," Dmitri spat. "I yield." He reached into his jacket, slowly, as if to pull out a white flag. "Gun!" Silas screamed. Dmitri didn't pull out a flag. He pulled a compact Sig Sauer and fired blindly at Genevieve. Time fractured. Silas moved faster than thought. He threw his body across Genevieve's, tackling her to the stone floor. The bullet grazed his tactical vest, sparks flying, tearing into the flesh of his shoulder. The room erupted. Silas's mercenaries opened fire. The warlords dove for cover. Dmitri flipped the heavy oak table, using it as a shield, firing wildly. "Silas!" Genevieve screamed, seeing the blood welling up on his arm. "I'm fine!" Silas grunted, rolling to his knees, raising his MP7. "Stay down!" He advanced on the table, moving through the hail of gunfire like a phantom. He didn't feel the pain in his shoulder. He only felt a cold, white-hot rage. His father had tried to kill her. Dmitri popped up to fire again, but Silas was already there. Silas kicked the gun out of his father's hand, the sound of breaking fingers echoing. Dmitri howled, falling back against the stone fireplace. He looked up at his son, his eyes full of hate. "Do it!" Dmitri screamed. "Finish it! Be a killer, like I taught you!" Silas leveled the barrel of the gun at his father's forehead. His finger tightened on the trigger. It would be so easy. Just one squeeze, and the nightmare was over. The man who had tormented his childhood, who had bombed his home, who had tried to kill the woman he loved. Gone. "Silas, no!" Genevieve's voice cut through the ringing in his ears. She was standing behind him, unharmed. She didn't look scared. She looked commanding. "Don't do it for him," she said firmly. "And don't do it for me. Do it for yourself. If you kill him in cold blood, you are a Volk. If you let him rot in a cell, you are a Vane. You are the man I trust." Silas stared at his father. He saw the fear in the old man's eyes, not fear of death, but fear of irrelevance. Silas exhaled. He lowered the gun. "You're not worth the bullet," Silas whispered. He pistol-whipped Dmitri across the jaw with a brutal, efficient stroke. The crime lord collapsed, unconscious, into the ashes of the fireplace. "Secure him," Silas barked to his team. "And signal Interpol. We have the package." He turned to Genevieve. The adrenaline was fading, and his knees felt weak. "You okay?" he asked, his voice rough. Genevieve didn't answer. She threw her arms around his neck and kissed him. It wasn't a polite, royal kiss. It was desperate, fueled by survival and 3 years of unspoken longing. It tasted of adrenaline and victory. Silas froze for a second. Then his good arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him, burying his face in her neck. "I'm okay," she whispered against his lips. "We're okay." 3 months later, the morning sun hit the balcony of the Valorian Palace, turning the Mediterranean Sea into a sheet of diamonds. Genevieve sat at the wrought-iron table, sipping her coffee. She wasn't wearing a uniform or a ball gown. She was wearing a simple white sundress, her hair loose in the breeze. On the table lay a copy of the New York Times. The headline read, "Sterling Dynasty Crumbles. Preston Sterling sentenced to 25 years. The article detailed the trial, how Preston had wept when the judge read the verdict, how Victoria had tried to blame everything on her husband, only to be dragged away screaming, how Tiffany St. Clair was currently working as a hostess in a mid-tier restaurant in Jersey, her family assets seized by creditors. Karma hadn't just hit back, it had dropped a nuclear bomb. "Good news?" a voice asked. Silas walked onto the balcony. He wasn't wearing his tactical gear or his stiff suit. He was wearing a linen shirt, the sleeves rolled up, revealing the scar on his shoulder, a permanent reminder of the night in the castle. "The best," Genevieve smiled, pushing the paper away. "The chapter is closed." Silas walked over and poured himself a coffee. He looked relaxed, years younger than the man who had stood in the penthouse in New York. "The council is asking about the security protocols for the upcoming coronation," Silas said, leaning against the railing. "They want to know if the head of security will be standing on the dais or in the crowd." Genevieve stood up and walked over to him. She placed her hands on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Actually," she said, a playful glint in her eyes, "I informed the council this morning that I will be making a change to the Royal Guard protocols." Silas raised an eyebrow. "Oh, am I being fired?" "Promoted," she corrected. "I told them that the Queen cannot be guarded by a mere employee. It's a conflict of interest." "So who will guard her?" Silas asked, his voice dropping low, his hands finding her waist. "Her husband," Genevieve whispered. Silas froze, his eyes widening. "Genevieve, are you sure? The scandal, a former mercenary, the son of a crime lord?" "The man who saved my life," she countered. "The man who helped me find my voice. The only man who ever saw me when I was invisible." She pulled a small velvet box from her pocket. Inside was a simple platinum band. No diamonds, just strength. "I did the proposing last time," she joked softly. "But I think this time we do it right. Will you marry me, Silas Vane?" Silas looked at the woman who had scrubbed floors to survive, who had brought down an empire of greed, and who had walked into a warlord's castle to save him. He took the ring. He didn't kneel. He stood tall, meeting her gaze as an equal. "Yes," he said, "until the end of the line, Your Highness." "Drop the title, Silas," she smiled, pulling him in for a kiss as the Valorian bells began to ring in the city below. "Yes, Genevieve, just Genevieve." And that is the incredible end of Genevieve's journey, from a humiliated wife scrubbing floors in the Hamptons to the queen who took down 2 empires, the Sterlings and the Syndicate. She didn't just get revenge, she got justice, and she found a love that was worth fighting for. It's a powerful reminder that no matter how much people try to push you down, your true worth isn't defined by their opinions, but by your own strength. Preston chose gold and lost everything. Genevieve chose dignity and won the world. I hope you enjoyed this 7-part saga. If this story gave you chills, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. And tell me in the comments, do you think Preston deserved 25 years? Or was that too lenient? I'll be reading your replies. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.